Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the world-famous FTN Network. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur, college basketball and college football aficionado. We're out here. We are 1 week into the season. Got to go to a Husky game already, watched a million games on ESPN Plus and other streaming platforms, because I got to tell you, you can do all the number crunching, you can look at box scores, you can do everything possible besides watch games and still miss a whole lot. Our good friend Mike Kutry watches a million games as well. The only way you're going to know what's happening is by watching games. And I would highly recommend, at least with teams that show up on the slates a lot, you try to at least watch, one or two of their games, have an idea of what happens in certain situations, familiarize yourself with two-foul participation, which is a stat you can find on Ken Palm. Watch the Super Show, of course. Hang out in the FTN CBB DFS Discord, where we post starting lineups on stat broadcasts. We talk a lot of trash, we tilt, and we celebrate, as well as look back on lineups, analyze that. We work together on lock per game when somebody's not starting or is starting. For example, Alan Breed this morning, didn't start that game against the non-D1. Pretty much figured he'd start today, and he did. We were able to, make sure that he was in our lineups. There's been several games already the past week where somebody didn't start that was supposed to. Late scratch with the Pop Isaacs type, put us on Cliff Davis, Big Daddy Cliff, as we were calling him. Lots of crazy stuff going on in the Discord already. Lots of green screens and window trips as well. Mike Randall, our content officer and betting machine that he is. Lots of good stuff happening at FTN. So hopefully you guys are hanging out with us there. FTNfantasy.com is where you can check that out if you're not a member already. CBB Super Show will be on air every Monday night for the next month or so. College football wrapping up, pretty soon. We've got a couple of weeks left, and we've got conference championships, and we've got bowl season. So still going to be doing every Thursday night with my man Jake Kuchek, where we're going to be talking about college football, the main slate there, and then, of course, Saturday morning, where we do the live Q&A session. Last Saturday was nuts. We had all the injury news to go through. Can't become complacent on Saturday mornings, that's for sure. We actually had a really good slate there with Bryson Daly absolutely nuking with the chalk that was Kanye Udo bricking hard. So lots of fun stuff. And then probably by Thanksgiving, we will be adding a Friday show. So I'll be live Monday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday morning. Once college football officially ends, we're going to be on air Monday night, Tuesday night, and Friday night. We'll do away with the Saturday mornings. Friday night, we'll hang out with myself and my super friends that want to hang out with me as well, where we'll be breaking down the big Saturday slate when there's nothing else left. No football, just basketball. Contests will be bigger. I know right now they're a little bit small, but FanDuel especially has some small contests, but the edge is really big right now, parsing through these different values and who's a hero and who's a fraud, come up with the term fraudulent value. So we're going to talk all about that. We have a 7-game slate that we're going to go through here from DraftKings after they put us through a 11-gamer tonight. And then, of course, on Saturday, we had the 2 games. What was it? 9 games for the early set with college football going on, then the 5-game night set. And then, of course, another 9, 10, 11 games yesterday. We love it, though. We're Iron Men and women around here. We don't mind. We love it. College basketball is here and back. Whoa, who's that? That's Razzle 11 Grinds. He is out there in the audience. Hey, Raz. He's a guy that hangs out with us every once and again from the army that is the DFS army. Good guy there. in Dynasty League with him and various other things. No, really good guy. Wins the what is it? The Sirius XM League every single year. Nothing bad to say about Razzle, except if you do find yourself in a league, and I'm sure the baseball guys can probably attest to this, and you try to make a trade with the guy, really can expect to get a message back via pigeon in like 3 months when you do request a trade. I kid. He is he's pretty slow at trades. Chase, appreciate you dropping in, man. Love to see it. Lots of you guys out there. Keep coming in. Drop those comments as we go. And then, we're going to start having guests on and doing our thing. Just because our man Mike Kutry is doing his thing on the Dub Club independently now doesn't mean we're not still friends. We'll have him on occasionally. He'll be doing Mike Randall's show as well. And of course, that man over there, Razzle, we'll have him on from time to time when he's not asleep. He stays up late just like me. But I got to say, Raz, this is a bad season for me for trying to stay up. I pulled 2 all-nighters already, and it's a bad situation. I don't know if I can do it this season. Migraines and just all kinds of badness. So inching 1 year closer to 40. We'll be 40 years old on August 2nd, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit, but I'm glad to see you guys here. Let's get into this slate here. We're starting to get some data up. And one of the things you can expect with the content this year, if you're not part of FTN yet and you're kind of wondering what it is that we have, because there's a lot less of college basketball content out this year. When we started doing this back in 2013, 2014 on Blog Talk Radio, blast from the past, there wasn't a lot providing content, just like 2 or 3 of us, right? And over the years, more and more people popping up on Twitter and other sites, and as they grow, and that's great. That's all fine and dandy, but it is a hard sport. We know that. Edge goes to those who watch games and dig into the info, and with the bigger sites like Roto Grinders not really doing much with CBB now that I'm aware of, and a couple of other like Twitter and mobile providers have dropped out. So there's not a lot out there. But as we said, Iron Man and women, we're still doing our thing. We do have projections earlier this year. That was something that, over the last couple of years, you guys have really supported the content and what we provide. But the one thing that we were missing was the projections. We finally got to a place last year where we have a very good system, pulling box scores, and it's pretty accurate for the most part. I was a little bit worried starting it off so early last year. It took us about a month to really get going last year with it, and it provided you guys a lot of winners, which we're appreciative of and happy about. We did start rolling that out on day 1. It's a bit messy, having to use exhibition scores, high school stuff, but we've started to clean that up, doing some manual edits, and it looks like overall today was pretty solid for the projections. Not only do we just offer that, because some people do just give that, right, and then nothing else. We do have slate context notes, so not only will you be getting those projections, but you'll also have a variation of my article right now where I will give a price point from high range to mid range to values. That way you can see in a priority preferential area what I like from left to right. Here's my favorite pay up, and then you have different pay ups, different mid range, different values from my priority standpoint. So when you're building your lineup, you can land and rest assured that, hey, this is the player pool we're working with. These are the projections. Here's why I like this player. A blend of the two. So you have those projections plus my slate context together, the blend of the human eye watching games and the computer. That's the best way to do it. I feel like we're at the pinnacle of our content now, 1 decade later. I think it's the best it's ever been. Once college football starts to, like it's already winding down, it's gone, we will have daily articles for college basketball. Right now we're providing the projection sheet and the context notes, which I'm very, very proud of so far. Appreciate your guys' continued support. Takes more planning as we get older, man. I don't know. I used to be able to do that, right? And of course, when we were in our 20s and you could just drink all night and then go to work and be fine. And I couldn't even imagine like 1 sip of alcohol and then trying to go to work the next day. Call me weak if you want to, but it's no fun being hungover at work. And fortunate that we can do this for at least part of our jobs is nice. But yeah, at this point I got to sleep. I value sleep a lot. All right, let's get into this slate here. 7-gamer, some competitive games. We've been dealing with these blowouts. That's the other thing in these non-con games. You have to try to predict minutes, right? Who's going to get pulled in blowouts? What coaches keep their guys out there with net rankings? Some coaches, point differential is important. not getting you guys hurt. Like we saw with Creighton the other night, Ryan Kalkbrenner, he didn't play the last 13 minutes of the game and still put up a huge number. Had they put him in for one more stint, he would have put up an even bigger number. We know he went absolutely bonkers at low ownership on their first game against Rio Grande. He's going to be a fun player, but that's for example there. Also got dogged out on Asa Newell a little bit yesterday. He would have easily completed, a 5X number, 40 plus fantasy points with full minutes. They pulled him out there, especially in the second half, and he wasn't really putting his foot on the gas much. And of course, Dakota Flefieu was going bonkers yesterday and taking all the shots. That won't be something that happens too often. So really got to parse your way through these. The nice thing about this slate is we have some really high level matchups. Kansas taking on Michigan State. We also have dare I say, a likable Duke team for the first time in forever against Kentucky. So we can take some pay ups here between Cooper Flagg, Hunter Dickinson, players like that we know aren't going to get pulled. We also have Norchad Omier, who's pretty competent player, consistent. We've got our Colin Murray Boyles talking about 10K. That's a crazy price. And of course, Trey Johnson, who looks like he is going to be this year's iteration of Cam Thomas, but he's not a secret like Cam Thomas was for the first 2 months of his collegiate career. So there's a lot to go through here. Let me pull up. We're going to go old school here, and we're going to do a little Ken Palm action instead of the Vegas totals. So we'll start with Michigan State versus Kansas, neutral court. Ken Palm has it projected 78-73 in favor of the Jayhawks. Right now, tempo rankings, not really a lot for me to go on. I can sit here and give you all that stuff, but we need a little bit more games here. Defensively, the Spartans are top 10 in defensive efficiency, but they've played Monmouth and Niagara. Kansas is going to be a little bit different here, I may say. And this Jayhawks team, something they were lacking last year, depth. And I know a lot of people will sit here and say, well, when it comes to tournament time, depth isn't that important. Teams are going to play 6, 7 guys anyway, so you don't need depth. Well, you got to have that 6, 7, and 8 spot, don't you? And Kansas had 4, maybe 4.5 guys that they could actually trust last year. And with the injuries to key players and foul outs and everything else, they just were basically playing 3-on-5 a lot of the time last year, and it wore coach self out. And what Kansas was able to do in the portal this past offseason was go out and take key players, starters from mid-major teams, rotation players away from these programs and stick them on his bench. Let's go into Kansas a little bit here and just read off some of this depth that they have. As it stands, the starting lineup that they've gone with, which you would expect, DeJuan Harris, Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams. They did get the Alabama transfer Rylan Griffin. He's starting. And then David Coit, who I did not expect to be a starter. That was a surprise for me. Big-time scorer from Northern Illinois. When he committed to Kansas late in the offseason, I didn't think that was going to be anything more than 5-6 minutes, something that didn't seem like a very good fit. It seemed like, okay, he's going there maybe to win a title. That's fine. But, man, his stats are really going to suffer quite a bit. And I almost felt like it was going to turn into a Joseph Yesufu situation where Yesufu was so good at the mid-major level, had some big games at Kansas at times, but mostly just rode the pine. But no, he's starting so far. But this depth that they have really came in handy in that 92-89 victory over North Carolina. North Carolina looked completely overmatched in the first half. They kind of clamped down in the second, tried to come back, couldn't quite do that. They got the big game out of Hunter Dickinson at 20 and 10. DeJuan Harris, defensively, he exerted a lot of energy. KJ Adams played 37 minutes of that game. No real foul trouble for KJ. Bravo. 14 points, just a lot of defensive minutes there for him. And then off the bench, you saw Zeke Mayo, who huge, phenomenal player for South Dakota State. One of the best over the last couple of seasons in the Summit League, coming off the bench for them. And this is where that depth really showed out, because in the past, maybe last year for sure, but maybe in the year before that, they would have just run out of gas. There wouldn't have been enough. They couldn't have KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris combined for 24 points, have Hunter Dickinson score as 20 and 10, but who else is going to give them anything? 2 starters who in Griffin and Coit combined for 6. Well, Mayo scored 21 points off the bench, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, played 29 minutes. Now, I kind of like him coming off the bench a little bit. When you got so many high usage guys. This is what fell apart for Arkansas last year. You got a lot of me first, the ball dominant players coming together, and that doesn't always work. When you separate them out like this, and Griffin, who a player who doesn't need to score, Coit usually does. We'll see how long this lasts. And then Mayo coming off the second unit, that really gives them a big advantage. And they still have AJ Storr, who apparently started in the minor doghouse of Bill Self nice and early. He made some comments during their last presser before the first game that Storr wasn't quite to the level he needed to be in so many Bill Self isms. But Storr did play 28 minutes, scored 13 points, hit a key three there late, like really, really good depth. Have the youngster Flory Bendunga off the bench. They can easily go 8 deep, maybe 9. Really solid, this Kansas team. So I'm not a big fan of this team like as much as everybody else. I do think they'll make a deep run Elite 8 floor. I don't know if they're the national champions. I'm kind of just going to be up the UConn ass again because they look ridiculous. But the depth is important. Now, that depth does hurt us for DFS purposes, and already the first run of the sheet doesn't particularly love any of the Kansas guys. Now, if this was Zeke Mayo last year, Summit League superstar at 7.3K, I could sit here and be like, he's going to be 75% owned because that's a silly, cheap price for a player like Zeke Mayo. Not so much here. It is a close game. We don't have more than 2 games to sit here and say, here's one that was a blowout. Here's one that was close. He played more in the close game, so that stands to reason. Maybe there's an outside chance that he gets the start over Coit. I think that might ruin a little bit of that kind of simpatico that they're building up. This is really not important. Who starts is more who finishes, right? And I think Mayo's going to be that guy for them all season long. Coit's okay at 5'4". Don't think he's going to get anything more than 20 minutes. Griffin at 4'8", same thing. He's out there as the 4th or 5th Beatle, if you will. I don't think he's ever going to have a truly dominant game. You're looking for more peripherals from him. And then as far as using Badunga, not yet. I think there will be some times there. We'll have to catch on some games where it's blowouts and getting him in a GPP type of lineup. And even then he's 4'4". It's not as if he's super cheap. And then Hunter Dickinson as a definite premier pay up. The last couple of slates haven't been priced particularly well, but the nice thing is all the value that we've had, people are having trouble with it because some of those guys are going off against the Biblical Studies University, and some of those guys are having big games against Central Michigan. So you have to be able to figure out which value works the best to get these guys in, like Hunter Dickinson. And that's one thing that the projections we have been able to kind of suss out. What was it on Sunday? Fairleigh Dickinson playing Creighton. Creighton's a team that we're going to be able to target for and against a lot this year defensively until they show us they're willing to play defense. We're going to target against them. And we had the pretty low-owned Terrence Brown play that had a really nice offensive game there, kind of mirrored Cliff Davis a little bit. So stuff like that. We're gonna definitely want some Hunter Dickinson exposure here. Michigan State has a ton of bodies. They're going to use all their fouls, rest assured, but Dickinson is a relatively safe play here on a neutral court. As far as anyone else, like Adams at 7K, he feels like more of a last play in, but I'm not quite there with him. He does have his games, but the 37 minutes he played, looking at his lack of peripherals, pretty concerning to me. I need to see some more aggressiveness from him before I start paying that price. And you would think that we'd want to have heavier exposure to this competitive game, but that might not be the case so much here on this particular slate. For Michigan State, Jaden Akins, he had a real nice game 1, and then he faded back a little bit. 8K is too high of a price for him. If his shots aren't falling, I think we're going to have some real difficulties. We were paying 4.7 for Akins for the majority of his career. So to now go up and pay that 8K price, I think that's just too much of an ask. The game against Niagara, it was close for the first quarter of it, and Akins looked like he was going to be aggressive. But as soon as he missed those first couple of threes, he just kind of foot off the gas. Did play 27 minutes, but there was really no aggressiveness. He did have 6 rebounds, but a lot of those just kind of fell into his hands. Frankie Fiddler still finding his way, the transfer from Omaha. And then you have a relatively cheap group of guards here. Jeremy Fears, who I think steps up in a big way through the season. When pricing tightens, I think he's going to be one of those guys that we're using a lot more. Trey Holloman showed flashes. He's sitting there at 4.9. And then you have the freshman Jace Richardson at 5'8". He's going to have a big slate-breaking performance here very soon. But we're probably not able to use him just yet, especially at that 5'8" price. I did see some love last slate for Simone Sapala, I saw, what was it, north of 20% ownership. It was a bit surprising to see that for him. He does seem to be starting at least the first 2 games. The 7-footer played 16 and 19 minutes, has mostly avoided foul trouble. Now against Monmouth, he had 9 and 8, 3 blocks, showing out. Niagara, he was a little bit less effective. The usage rate there is what's going to be the main concern, because if he's not blocking shots and grabbing rebounds, he's really not going to pay. And it's a big difference, 6-1 for him, than if it were to be 3-7, 4-1, 4-4, like some of these more appealing values we've had over the last week of the season that has started. Carson Cooper, Jackson Keeler, those types of plays, they're all just going to play that 15 to 20-minute role. Kurt Tang has some outside shooting ability, but really this game doesn't have that much excitement in the first run of the Jacksons. Don't really like this game at all. It feels like most people are priced where they should be. Frankie Fiddler, I think this is going to be a nice litmus test to see where he's at. If he completely just kind of bombs out and doesn't do well, I think it's going to be a major problem. Michigan State has mostly stayed out of the transfer portal in a high degree, but when they do, they do quality over quantity, right? And they've landed some pretty good ones over the last couple of years. Tyson Walker, the Northeastern transfer, he was very, very productive. It took him some time to figure it out, right? But when he did, he got really good. And of course, Razzle's favorite player ever, Joey Hauser, became an actual superstar for Michigan State at one point. But we'll see with Fiddler. I'm still on the fence there with what he's going to be turning into. All right, Towson versus South Carolina. This is one that, South Carolina, the breakout lists everywhere had Colin Murray Boyles. And sure enough, at 10K, and it's no secret at this point, right? Ken Palm does have this one 72-65 in favor of South Carolina, so a relatively close game. They did lose to a very good North Florida Ospreys team on the season opener, 74-71, and then they beat South Carolina State 86-64. They took care of business there. That was the game in which Murray Boyles asserted himself. 35 minutes, 19 points. 16 rebounds, 4 assists, had some turnovers, but really dominant performance for Colin Murray Boyles. And we're going to be missing the days last year where we got him, 5K, 6K, that type of range, because to see him at 10K, it's a bit alarming for sure. The matchup against Towson, you would think theoretically should be a really big one in which he should be able to take advantage of. Usually aggressive front court players tend to do well against these types of teams. Towson recently played Penn State Wilkes-Barre, so that's basically the Biblical Studies University type of school, right? And then they played St. Mary's on the opener, lost 76-69. They pushed St. Mary's for sure. St. Mary's is going to be a down year for them, but very, very good performance there out of them. But we did see one of the forwards on St. Mary's pull down 13 rebounds, 14 points. Paulus Maraskis, some people will be talking about on some of those late night WCC slates. So there is theoretic reason for Colin Murray Boyles to be in play here at 10K, even because he will be pulling down a likely double-double, barring any foul trouble. Now, we haven't had South Carolina on a slate yet, so the starting lineup that they have been, or that they ran with in the last game at least, in addition to CMB, Jamari Thomas, Jacoby Wright, Nick Pringle, and Miles Stute. Now, because of all the transfer portal stuff that happened, you're going to hear names and you're going to be confused and think, wait a minute, Nick Pringle, I thought he was on Alabama. Well, he was, sure. And he was on Wofford at one time, but he's going to finish out his collegiate career here out South Carolina. Definitely has been a rebounding machine so far. He had 9 against North Florida, but definitely showing his fouling side, which we saw at Alabama in shorter stints. He did foul out in 23 minutes against SC State. So going to have a high foul rate, high block rate, and a very good rebounding, defensive rebounding rate. He is there at 5'4", probably about where you would think. In the past, we had Jacoby Wright and Zachary Davis as value type plays. They're both also priced about where you would expect. And then Jamari Thomas up there at 6'9". So not getting any discounts on the starters here whatsoever. Thomas spent a couple of seasons with UNC Wilmington, and then he was a high usage gunner type player at Norfolk State last year. Looks like he's going to be more of a secondary option for South Carolina as he gets assimilated, but definitely a high-level defender, but paying 7K for him, that feels a little bit tough to me. Did have 14 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and 2 steals. he'll put some numbers up, but we need to have him be a little bit cheaper there beforehand. And then Miles Stute down there at 4K. He lives in that range, right? He was 3.2, 3.7, 4.5 all season long there. And once we get to the slates where, man, we don't have value, what do we do? And then the answer is Miles Stute. When Raz tells me that, I know it's going to be a tough slate. So far, he has done Miles Stute things, and basically that means nothing at all. 17 minutes in the North Florida game as a starter. He did have 6 points, hit a couple of threes, no other counting stats. No turnovers, which is great, but no other stats. And then against South Carolina State, 3 points, 1 for 6 from long range, 7 rebounds, that a boy, 3 blocks. He got after it on that end, 2 turnovers. He is cheap. You know, we've been pretty spoiled with values the last 3 slates. So we're already getting our resident Mark Zilla telling me that the value's got to be 10x or more to really count. I don't think we're going to get that from a player like Miles Stute, but he does fit into our lineups and make things possible, like playing his teammate CMB or Hunter Dickinson. Only other relevant players on this team, Cam Scott, the freshman, and Morris Ugusk, who is a Finnish player that was on the team as a freshman last year, has grown a little bit, more of a three-point shooter, but really these first couple of games, at least on the high major side, haven't been all that exciting. Are we paying for Dickinson? Are we paying for CMB? Perhaps, but we're going to have to find some value. And lucky for you, in the next couple of games, we have some severely underpriced players. On the Towson side, there are some recognizable names here through the first part of the season. Excuse me. In the game against St. Mary's, the starting 5 that we can expect to see: sophomore Tyler Tejada, Christian May, Dylan Williamson, Nenda Tarki, and Abdu Sam. Off the bench, priority plays: Makais Lowry, Messiah Jones, and Tamawa Suleiman. Messiah Jones has been in college forever. I'm actually quite shocked he has another year. I think this is year 7. I'm not lying. This is year 7 for Messiah Jones. Spent almost 5 years at Wofford. Now he's doing his thing here. Was mostly a role player type. Did get in the starting lineup last year for Towson. Pretty strong rebounder, defender. Somebody who down there at 4.8 is playable, but more of a playable option as we get further into the season. I think right now that's a pretty tough one to get around. South Carolina defensively and pace-wise, they're not going to be the most fantasy-friendly environment to target against, but I definitely think Tyler Tejada at 6'4" has to at least be in somewhat of consideration, at least through the first one here. He did have 18 points against a pretty solid, not great St. Mary's team. Played 30 minutes, so we can expect that, barring foul trouble. The non-D1 opponent, 18 minutes as a starter there, did put up 15 and 3. And so far, the early going, he has the 15th highest shot rate in the country at 41.7%, top 50 usage rate at 33.7%. So a lot of what they do is going to run through him. 8 threes through the first 2 games, 19 shots inside the 3-point arc through those 2 games. The non-D1, 3 for 4, but against the St. Mary's team in which they pushed them, 7 of 15 on non-3-point field goals. He's going to get a lot. He's about 6'9", 6'10". He's physical, but he also has a pretty decent shot. Very hard for him to be defended by more traditional big men. But it's also going to be tough for him to deal with a guy like CMB on the other side. So we'll see how that goes foul-wise, but Tejada at 6'4", definitely in play. The other starters, Christian May at 5'2", Tarky 5'2", Williamson 5K. Those are all decent enough looks. Christian May did play 32 minutes against St. Mary's, been with Towson for a while. 25.6% usage rate thus far. Does draw 5.5 fouls per 40 through those 2 games, but also being called for 6.2 fouls. That's something that dogged him out a little bit his freshman year, not as much now. He fouled out against St. Mary's, so that number is going to be skewed. Don't really concern myself with that. Similar to Breed from McNeese State, started the first game, didn't play the game against a non-D1. That is one of those situations that unless I missed it, I don't think I did, they just didn't play him. He's not actually going to be hurt or anything like that. So we'll see overall how that's going to work out. But I think the most part, Tejada is going to be our guy here if we want to use anyone. And you do have at 4.1K Abdu Sam as a starter. That's going to be tough to trust him. In the St. Mary's game, he played 12 minutes, got into some early foul trouble, and then he just never came back. They do move him to the bench in the second game. He looked a little bit better, but that was a situation where I don't expect him to be a starter again. And if he does, he's not really going to be playable even at a cheap price. You may remember he was a freshman at Rhode Island. He's been bopping around the collegiate sport ever since. Not really a guy that we want to look to so much. The first two games sounds doom and gloom, but we're going to have some better options here with Florida Atlantic versus UCF. UCF, they've been on the slate, once, twice? Great game, great win over Texas A&M. Turned around, they got pushed by a decent mid-major team in Purdue Fort Wayne and got the win there. Johnny Dawkins, coaching for his life. Might not be the hottest of hot seats, but it's probably hot for sure. Mike Randall, our betting master, before the season, he was very high on UCF. I told him he might be a little crazy because Dawkins is bringing in all these, lack of a better term, head case type of players. And so far it's worked. And one of those wins against a really good Texas A&M team and maybe a semi-broken Wade Taylor. I don't know. His first couple of games, not that great. This Florida Atlantic team, it's going to provide them a good test. Ken Palm has it 78-72 in favor of UCF. I certainly think that there is a Razzle in the chat there's, sidebar real quick, CMB. I tried to get him from the new guy in our dynasty league, and he was taxing quite a bit, and made it seem like I was going to keep him, and then you swoop in and get him there. So well done, because I did try. I knew it was coming, and I did try. All right, so far through the first couple games, Florida Atlantic playing at an extremely fast pace. They scored 97 points against Indiana State, 99 against Coastal Georgia, mighty Coastal Georgia, mind you. Very effective and efficient offense so far. The starting lineup that we are likely to see: Ken Evans, Leland Walker, Baba Miller. Yes, no longer on FSU, and he is playable, but more so because I just don't want to give him up. I refuse to accept defeat when it comes to Baba Miller. Kai Tandy, who spent some time with Xavier early in his career and was a dog at Jacksonville State last year. And then Modis Vakiatitis, because it wouldn't be FAU without an international front court player with a difficult name to say. Off the bench so far, some pretty solid options. Trey Carroll, who was on the team last year. Nicola Moretti, who transferred in from Illinois. And he looked really good in their last game. And then Caleb Glenn. Caleb Glenn was the part of the really awful Louisville team last year. Don't blame him. He's a good player. I think he's going to be really nice for them. Moving through the pricing here for FAU, Ken Evans. He's definitely the one that I think has the most overall upside floor combination, but he's also priced at 7.8. So we're not getting a major discount there for Ken Evans. And so far, he's rebounded fairly well. He's getting assists. He's hitting threes. He's contributing in all categories. So he is priced up really high. Spent the majority of his career at Jackson State, where it was a very high usage scoring three-point machine last year. Fitting in really well with this new look FAU team with Dusty May off to Michigan. John Jacobs now the coach here at FAU, and so far off to a good start. Would be a huge early season win for them to beat a UCF team who many say will make the tournament. Hyperbole is the name of the game when it comes to collegiate media, by the way. Nicola Moretti, highest shot rate on the team at 28.1%. Second highest usage rate at 25.2%. Transferring over from Illinois has been a huge thing for him so far. Shooting 75% from long range. Again, it's 2 games, but it sounds good to talk about him like that. So far, hasn't started just yet, but he's getting decent enough minutes. 27 against Coastal Georgia, and then the game against Indiana State, 21. Closer one like this, might we see him get closer to 30 here? It's possible. He is priced at 5.2, so semi-value. We like to, like the Walmart special, 4.9K, right? And then 5.1K, but at 5.2 is semi-value, I promise. And then Caleb Glenn there at 3.7. I did think Glenn would be a starter early on. That hasn't happened yet, but he is playing pretty solid minutes. His overall usage rate hasn't been great yet, but he's got a really high block and steal rate. He did shoot only 9 threes last year in parts of 32 games. This year he's already shot 3, made one of those, looking more aggressive. He made more. He's 1 for 3 against Indiana State, but he was 3 of 6 against Coastal Georgia. So 4 threes already, broken his career high, looking more aggressive. I do feel like we see him play mid-20s minutes. That was the case against Indiana State. He played less against Coastal Georgia. So he's going to be one of those values that projects really well for us. And may not see the ownership that some of the others will, because we have tended to see some of the non-starting values not be owned, and some of the starters on some of the smaller programs that people overlook also. But I think Glenn is a guy that gets missed by the masses. Trey Carroll, another key piece off the bench at 3.8, a little bit harder for me to get to him. And then as far as the rest of the starters go, Tandy at 6.2, he's fine if you want to go there. I think it's pretty risky. I don't know that he's going to give you the peripherals. And if he doesn't have a 18 to 20 point real game, I think that play has a lot of downside to it. But the good news is against the UCF guards, he's going to have to be putting up a ton of shots. So certainly a GPP look there on Tandy. And I think he might get more ownership than probably he should. But I'm a little bit lower on him than I think the rest of the world will be. Leland Walker there at 6.1, and then Baba Miller at 5.9. Let's take a look at what Baba has done so far, because I know you're interested, because last year at the 4.7, 5.1, 4.5 prices, when pricing got tight, it was like, we can play Baba. He can do this. He's, that there's talk about him being an early draftee, one and done. Didn't work out. Sophomore year, didn't work out. Got himself in a new environment against Indiana State, 13 points. He hit a couple of threes, which is a huge deal because he, kind of had the Ben Simmons thing going where he just wouldn't shoot at all. And when he did, you just knew it wasn't going in. So it's great to see that. 9 rebounds, 4 steals, 1 block. One thing he's always been good about is racking up steals and blocks. His peripherals have been strong. We always said if he figures out how to score, he's going to be a very dangerous player. And he's taken a lot of high-level shots so far. Did play 24 minutes in the first game, 20 in the second. We can expect more 28 to 30 minutes here. Fouls have been a problem because he goes for the highlight blocks. He goes for the steals. He reaches. So fouling here against UCF is certainly a concern for me. But I do like him and more of a Walt's play that I just don't want to die yet. And since he's not going pro, I want to see him have a really big game. There are other players around the country like that. Matthew Alexander Moncrief, who plays for Seattle U right now and had a 15 and 11 double-double in his first game for them. That's one of the Walt's guys that I just never wanted to give up. Well, 5 years later, I can finally say that Mam has broken out, and I can say I told you so. And so can Raz, because I know he's one of his guys too. So that moves. Let's move on from FAU. I do like Caleb Glenn, I think, a lot there. That's one of those plays at 3.7 that I think makes a lot of sense that we can get away with. But we have to be careful because on LSU, what was it yesterday? And I made that big spiel in the Discord about we have to be careful of fraudulent values, guys that had big games in the first one. And one that I got caught out on right after that speech was Curtis Givens of LSU, who had a really nice 21 minutes against Louisiana Monroe. Hit 4 threes, had 6 rebounds, 2 assists, like super active. Then LSU gets themselves involved in a game against Alabama State where they were behind for most of it. Givens got into some foul trouble, but he missed his first couple of shots. DJ Bailey had like an amazing first half. And in the second half, it was all Jordan Sears and Cam Carter. It left Curtis Givens with 11 minutes and basically nothing to show for it. And that was one of those fraudulent values that I talked about. So have to be careful with those. I don't think Caleb Glenn is that, for what it's worth. UCF, Jalen Sellers is still questionable. Looks like it's going to be a while before we see him. That could change. Mikey Williams also dealing with an ailment, which is a foot issue. We haven't seen much of Dior Johnson. Jordan Ivy Curry's been doing his thing, still priced at a level where we can get to 7.2K. He was down in the 4 or 5K range where he was a no-brainer. Everybody had him at 7.2. It's more of a thought, but I do think he is an intriguing matchup or an intriguing spot. Somebody that is going to get up a ton of shots until Sellers gets back. I think we're talking about a player here who's going to maintain a very high shot rate. 18 points in their win against Purdue-Fort Wayne. 3 assists, 3 steals. Darius Johnson had the huge game 1, kind of fell back down to earth there. Darius Johnson, we know he's going to have those slate-breaking games. He'll follow those up with like the most ridiculous subatomic floor games. But the big thing is there he's played 38 minutes in both of their games that have been close, and we can expect this one to be more the same. So he's going to be on the floor for the entire game. I don't know that I'm comfortable paying 9.3 for him. That does seem a little bit unjust, if you will. Rather just do the Ivy Curry thing there. They also have Benny Williams, who's played about 15 minutes off the bench there. J.J. Taylor, Dallin Coleman, a.k.a. Debo from Georgia Tech. So a lot of island of misfit toys on this team. Keyshawn Hall, who had a really big game against Fort Wayne, 14 points, 12 rebounds. He is somebody who, if he can stay on the floor, he's going to put up numbers. Against Texas A&M, he fouled out in 23 minutes. He had 10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He can fill it up in a hurry from all categories. I definitely like him to a degree as well. He's an affordable price there at 8.3 with a slate like this where we have so much value. Now, we're going to want to pay up to the Duke guys and some of the other options here, but Hall, if you're an MME guy, GPP-wise, he gives you guard forward eligibility. I think Hall's a little bit of a sneakier option there. And then at 5.1, you have Motiam, highly rated recruit, 7'2" guy. It's going to take him some time to really get acclimated, but he's been a starter from the very beginning. They've given him 22 and 26 minutes. Pretty decent shot rate so far. Does have 7 blocks. That's what happens when you're 7'2", 15.3% block rate. Had 13 points against Purdue Fort Wayne. Got a lot of bunnies. Took care of business there. 6 rebounds. Not quite cheap enough to call him a full-on value, but at 5.1, again, he's a semi-value, these terms that I like to say, and he's certainly worth a look. Debo Coleman might look okay at 4 or 5. There's just so many guards on this team. Even without Sellers, Mikey Williams, Dior Johnson really playing, they have so many. Now, Debo did start, played 20 minutes there against Fort Wayne, and he played 26 against Texas A&M, but he has only scored 3 total points in those games, and his peripherals have been pretty rough. We saw him be a pretty productive piece at Georgia Tech, especially in his last year there, but I think he's struggling a bit to find his way with all these different pieces that they have. Right now, it looks to be Darius Johnson, Jordan Ivy-Curry, Keyshawn Hall, show all playing 30-plus minutes, and then you're getting minutes from Motiam, J.J. Taylor, Benny Williams, Debo Coleman. Doesn't make any of them particularly exciting. I think Ivy-Curry is the play here with Caleb Glenn on the other side. And then, like I said, once Mikey Williams, Jalen Sellers come back, it's going to muddy the waters further. Ivy-Curry is probably going to be too expensive, and it's just going to be a situation where Debo probably doesn't find his way. And it's a story of transferring is nice because you can go to a team and play, more minutes theoretically, but it doesn't always work out that way. The grass is not always greener. Also, it's been 2 games, and we'll see if Mikey Williams, Dior Johnson can make it through a full season. No shade. All right, moving on here, we have Chicago State versus Texas. Chicago State's been a bad team, a down bad team, as the kids would say, for a long time, many years. I just don't know that they ever win games. Last year, they won 13, which I think was a pretty big step up from the 7 that they won back in 2022. But it's looking like it's going to be a bad situation here. They finally got rid of Jared Guion. Scott Spinelli is the coach now. Same result, poor defense, poor offense. They don't shoot the ball well. They did press Loyola Chicago and only lost 79-72, and that has to be considered a pretty big win against a Loyola Chicago team that is theoretically good on paper. So I'd say that's decent. And then they lost by 20 to Youngstown State, which is really a pretty rough one there. That they probably shouldn't be getting beat by 20 to Youngstown State. So Texas, this is going to be a rough one. This is one where there's going to be a huge blowout. Ken Palm has it 87-59. Starting with the Chicago State guys, early first run. Let's see here. We're going to have to clean it up a little bit. But Quincy Allen, Saxby Sunderland, which is an amazing name, by the way, and Gabe Spinelli, who is the coach's son. Those are the ones that are popping at the minute. Definitely like Quincy Allen, who's priced down there at 3.5. He has not been able to find his way. Started his career at Colorado, a fairly highly rated recruit. Couldn't get any minutes there. Plays at James Madison last year. Couldn't get any minutes there. Injuries, ailments, all that. Plays only 7 games. Leaves. Now he's on Chicago State, and probably a good, this is how the portal should be used. If you're a high major guy, you shouldn't, and you're not getting minutes, usage, opportunities, you shouldn't in turn go to another high major that's crowded or a mid major like James Madison's that's good because you're just not going to get minutes there unless it's incredible. What you should do is take yourself to Chicago State, where you're going to get a chance to absolutely run roughshod against your conference opponents. Is a starter so far, so we love that. 25 minutes against Loyola, 22 against Youngstown State. Does have a usage rate right around 22.4%. 9 points and 6 points in those games. 4 rebounds against Youngstown, 2 assists, 3 blocks, and a steal against Loyola. So he's given us a little bit of everything there. Obviously, this game here against a Texas team in which he struggled at the high major level might be tough. We just saw with Ernest Ross, the former NC State transfer, who was on, was it Grambling now? He had 3 fouls in the first half. Like, that's a real possibility here with Allen, who had a 7.3 fouls called per 40 rate, but again, he played 7 games. But I mean, as a starter there and the opportunities here at Chicago State, he's got to be in consideration. He's only 3.5K. How much damage can he really do to your lineup? As long as he doesn't bagel, I feel like at least that's somewhat of a win. If he gives you 1x, that's better than nothing. Gabe Spinelli, transfer from Monmouth, high shot rate, 31.2%, taking a ton, 12 shots against Youngstown State, 12 against Loyola. Peripherals are spotty, but definitely going to be a chucker. Not a big 3-point shooter, just gets it done, a lot of shots up, and gets to the foul line a lot, where he shot 1 for 7 against Loyola. Not great. So far, he's shooting 3 for 10. That's 30%. He's trying to be a regular great Osaboro over here in my Washington Huskies. They're bad at shooting free throws, let me tell you. But he's cheap price, 4-5 in the starting lineup. And then Zaxby Sunderland, the other one that I wanted to make sure to mention, priced at 3.8, 28 minutes in that game against Loyola, played about 20 in the block to Youngstown State. Another guy that gets to the foul line a lot. He's taken 18 through 2 games. The Loyola game, he was on point, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block filled it up. Struggled, shot 1 for 7 against Youngstown State. That was just a bad game overall for them. Usage rate about 24%. And again, getting himself to the foul line a lot. Kid can't shoot very well. 1 for 11 inside the arc, 1 for 4 out of it. But the nice thing is, once again, he's cheap at 3.8. So I do not mind using one of these Chicago State guys. They're going to struggle in the first half, sure. But when Texas calls off the dogs, there's going to be a lot of garbage time opportunity for these guys to rack up. And I think they'll play. I don't know that Chicago State will necessarily call off their dogs as well and play a bunch of walk-ons and guys. I think they'll play their guys in the blowout. So one of Quincy Allen, Zaxby Sunderland, or Gabe Spinelli makes a lot of sense to me. The most expensive player on the team, Noble Crawford, not playable at that price, has played 11 and 10 minutes so far off the bench. Now, Noble last year was a big-time player for this team, 30 minutes a game, big-time scorer, contributing in all categories. Hasn't started yet, not getting those minutes, not playable just yet. And this is one of those things where you're kind of like, people kind of try to take a shortcut and look at game logs perhaps, and they need to fill in. They might look at Noble Crawford and think, oh, well, he's their best player. He's playable. He can put up 30, right? And get burned. So it's nice, these early season edges. One of them, the most of the people playing are regulars, so it's not as if they're looking at these game logs. But some people do. And Crawford, like I said, just really isn't playable there. If you do use somebody from this team, I think it needs to be one of the 3 that I've mentioned. Now, on the Texas side, Trey Johnson is super, super expensive at 9.6. He is a bucket getter. My God. This is Cam Thomas Redux. Like, he's going to be scoring at such a high rate for this team. Number 3 on Ken Palm's Player of the Year rankings. 86.2% of the minutes, 27.9% usage rate, 33.9% shot rate. He's 55% from long range, 10 of 18 through those 2 games, has an assist rate of 22.1%, true shooting percentage of 69%. This dude is legitimate. And I saw him in the McDonald's All-American game, and it's an all-star game, no defense, whatever, but you can just tell certain dudes, like the way they play and the swagger and just the way they carry themselves around other stars. And this guy's it. I knew he would be good, but I'd be a liar to say that I thought he'd be the best player on the team right away. I mean, you're talking about a team that had to revamp themselves through the portal. They do bring back Kendall Weaver and Caden Shedrick, who are both important players, but Jason Kent, Julian Larry, Jordan Pope, Arthur Kaluma, These are some pretty big names they got out of the portal, but the freshman Trey Johnson has been the absolute everything for this Texas team. The game against Ohio State, in which they lost 80-72 on the neutral, 39 minutes, 29 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, a block. Then he follows that up with the blowout win over Houston Christian, in which they still gave him 30 minutes because coach knows who butters his biscuits. 28 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. You play this kid, doesn't matter what the situation is. Maybe he plays 28, 29 minutes, but he's going to have damn near 30 on these Chicago State guys. I know the price is expensive, and you're looking at ahead of him, Colin Murray-Boyles, who we love, Hunter Dickinson, Cooper Flagg, who's gotten to a price at 10.5. That's a little bit uncomfortable for me. Norchad O'Meara, who's been mired in foul trouble the first couple of games, but they have a much easier opponent now. Darius Johnson, who to me is overpriced. Arthur Kaluma, who had a new game, but I'll be damned if I trust Arthur Kaluma at 9K. Sean Padula in a crowded Ole Miss team. Like, who are you really paying for here? Trey Johnson, man. Like, the dude is just insane. And we're talking about a Texas team that has really, really solid depth as well. And they're not even at full strength quite yet. The starting 5 we can expect: Kendall Weaver, who did play 31 minutes in that blowout win. I'm glad to see Kendall stepping into such a high role for this team. Love Kendall Weaver. Trey Johnson, Arthur Kaluma, Caden Shedrick, who is manning the middle, and Jordan Pope. Kind of interchangeable there with Julian Larry to a degree. Jason Kent coming off the bench. Now, you're going to be tempted. Kent did play 18 minutes there, had 10 and 5. Larry played 28 minutes off the bench. You're going to be tempted to want to use those guys. And I don't hate the idea because we know how good from the Indiana State run these guys are. Now, 5'7" for Julian Larry. I don't know about that. Perhaps in a blowout, he gets another 28 minutes. He can get there, but he's a little bit high priced. Even in the game against Houston Christian, let me pull this up right quick. 2 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists. He took 2 shots. So a lot of empty minutes there. It was basically just standing around watching the Trey Johnson show. So I'm not really keen on paying that price. And that's a 1-game sample, so that's hard-hitting analysis, I know. But then you go into the Ohio State game where he played 23 minutes. He took 4 shots, did have 8 points, 5 assists, so we did a little bit more there, and had a steal, a couple of rebounds. More involved there, but that was a more competitive game. I just don't think we see that out of Larry. So there's a big difference between even 4.7 to 5.7 there. Now, we do get Jason Kent at 4.4, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to be really tempted to do that. Coming into the season, there were some question marks. Will he start? I didn't think he would start over Arthur Kaluma. Some people predicted that. I think Rothstein had Kent over Kaluma. I don't know why, but he's played 16 and 18 minutes off the bench thus far. Ohio State game really showed us that he's not going to be a big factor, at least not right now. It'd take time for that to gel, but he played those 16 minutes with only 1 rebound, only 2 points, took 4 shots, almost relegated to just like a 3-point shooter's corner standard type player. And that's not the Jason Kent that we grew up on when he played the last 2 seasons at Indiana State, being just an all everything. Number 1 true shooting percentage in the country last year, high level rebounder, just a really good player overall. Gave us a lot of low owned performances where he just blew up, especially in the NIT. But he's just not in that role. And that's the biggest struggle here when you're talking about transfers, what they're on, the team that they're on, all these things that are happening, right? So you're going to be tempted, but I do think Caleb Glenn would be the better look. I do think the same game, Quincy Allen, one of those guys, would be a better look. But if this one gets out of hand quickly, maybe they give Kent, 20, 22 instead. He's certainly in play. I just don't know that he's going to be that high level. I would say Kendall Weaver all day. He's the play I actually like a lot, but 6K, man, it's just such an uncomfortable price. I will give it up to DK. They've done a good job here pricing some guys up. 9K for Kaluma, Pope at 7.5. Like, some decisions to be made here. I think probably the best play overall is Caden Shedrick at 6.9. This is one of those classic, big men against an inferior front court, should grab a ton of boards, should have some rebounds, should be able to score a little bit. He had 4 blocks in that game against Houston Christian, 2 steals, had 10 points, 6 rebounds. Like, we're going to want a little bit more at that price, but he's definitely got the ability to put up a 30-plus game here. I'm certainly on board with using him if you don't want to pay up for Trey Johnson for whatever reason. The competitive game there 10 points, 5 rebounds, played 31 minutes, didn't have a ton of other stats there. There's a lot of empty minutes for these other Texas starters. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Trey Johnson is just getting it and has the full-on green light. Basically get the hell out of his way and let him work. That's what this has turned into. Weaver has taken advantage. He had 4 assists, 8 rebounds. Like, he's doing everything else, and we're getting a lot of standing around from other guys. I will say Arthur Kaluma tore it up. Houston Christian, he took advantage, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists. I think that could be the type of game we see out of Caden Shedrick this time, a double-double. I like him for a double-double there at that 6'9" price point. But you better believe I'm finding a way to pay for Trey Johnson in this game against Chicago State. I don't care if he even plays 25 minutes. We just got burned in the blowout by Kalkbrenner, but he still paid off his salary because of how good he is. I'm not worried about Trey Johnson not putting up a big number. Now, the projections don't know because I haven't told it. It only has the 2 games that he's played. Let's see here. Okay, guess it's not going to work. Yeah, so 43. That seems pretty reasonable, honestly. I think he can do that. I definitely think he can do that. I'm all over the play of Trey Johnson. All right, moving on. We have Ole Miss versus South Alabama. This Ole Miss team, very, very crowded at the moment. Not super keen on them just yet, but there are some playable options here. But let's start with South Alabama. In this game, Ken Pom has it 82-67 in favor of Ole Miss. They've beaten Nicholls 70-64 and turned around and lost to Central Michigan 74-70. 2 competitive games for them thus far. The starting 5 for South Alabama in those games: Miles Corey, Dylan Faciero, Barry Dunning, you'll know that name in a minute, Randy Brady, and John Broome. Not Joni Broome, John Broome. No relation. Barry Dunning transferred from Arkansas to UAB last year. Now he's transferred to South Alabama. Barry Dunning knows what time it is. The transfer portal era where you can just transfer every year. Didn't get any minutes as a freshman in Arkansas. Highly rated freshman, mind you. Goes to UAB. Doesn't get really a lot of minutes. Had some issues. Did have a pretty solid amount of his rates, like usage-wise, rebounds, all that stuff was pretty solid. But again, no real minutes. Goes to South Alabama, where they give him a starting gig. He plays 35 minutes against Central Michigan. He plays 29 against Nicholls, scores 14 and 8, takes 14 shots in the first game, 12 in the next, 6 rebounds, 3 rebounds, an assist, 3 turnovers, 25% usage rate in both of those games. His shot rate is 30%. You got to like a guy who understands the assignment, as they say. He is priced all the way down here at 4-4. You had Jason Kent at 4-4. You got Barry Dunning at 4-4, who's going to get more minutes. He's going to start. Yes, the matchup is more difficult, but he is a very, very solid option and a chance to kind of prove himself. It's funny because you see these guys who struggle at the high major level, then they go to these smaller schools, they become the focal point, and they actually have these big games against high majors, and then they get those offers to come back. And this is a good opportunity for Dunning to do so and kind of earn himself back into the high major level. The best player on the team so far through there, Miles Corey's priced accordingly at 7-1. No surprise there. 28% usage rate in their first game, played 38 and 37 minutes through the season, has a 31% usage rate thus far, 11 free throws for those first 2 games. He's drawing over 7.5 fouls per 40. He also has 19 assists in those first 2 games. This is a fun South Alabama team. Do not sleep on them in the Sun Belt. Sun Belt basketball is going to be a good one this year, let me tell you. As far as the rest of the team here, not a ton of interest there for me in like a John Broome. I think he's headed for he's a freshman, headed for some foul trouble. Their other guard, Dylan Faciero, has shown himself an ability to score, scored 17 against Nicholls, but this is Ole Miss. I think he's going to have some problems with turnovers. Price-wise, he's 5'5". We're not getting anything extra there. The primary options off the bench, Elijah Armstrong and Judah Brown. Judah Brown did play 26 minutes in their last game, formerly a St. Mary's transfer all the way back in 2021, playing a pretty comparable 25 minutes off the bench so far. He is a 3-point gunner. He has made 5 threes in each of the first 2 games, 15 points, 4 rebounds, a steal, and a block. Don't hate the idea of a gunner, but he's priced at 4.7, higher than Dunning. If it turns into a blowout, Brown's going to be the one that just comes in and absolutely chucks. Circle that play for your GPP stuff, because Brown is at least interesting there with the way he's shooting. And when you take a look at his shot rate, it's up over 26%, and he has a block rate of 7%. So he's shooting threes and he's blocking shots. That's an elite combination. You don't find that too often. All right, let's go over to Ole Miss. They are crowded. The Grambling State game on Friday, that was on the slate, 66. Oh, no, that one wasn't on the slate, was it? I can't remember now. But Ernest Ross had a big game there. Should have known he's going to get in foul trouble today. The starting 5 that we can be sure of at this point: Jalen Murray, Sean Padula, Matthew Morrell, who somehow still has collegiate eligibility, Dre Davis, who comes over from Seton Hall, Malik Dia, Jameen Brakefield off the bench with Devon Barnes, Mikel Brown-Jones, and Eduardo Klafke, the freshman. So far, we're seeing Morrell, Padula, and Murray play pretty heavy minutes, 30+. Dre Davis and Brakefield are kind of interchangeable pieces there. They're playing 25+. Dia has not played a lot. There were some foul issues there in that game against Grambling, but it was early. Only played 11 and 12 minutes so far as a starter. Don't love that a bit. They're going with a little bit more of a smaller lineup more often. That's probably opponent dependent, though. And then off the bench, we've seen Barnes play 17 and 18, which is kind of come right at the expense of Dia. Dia originally transferred from Vanderbilt, where he was a little used freshman. He had a big year at Belmont, had the highest usage rate in the country. Now he's got this chance. He's come back up to Ole Miss, and the first 2 games have not looked good. He's still priced like he's at Belmont at 6'4". I think he was even higher than that earlier. Wasn't he like almost 8K? So you can't use him there. Morrell at 7K is your most usable option. He's got great rates once again, but you know the deal with Matthew Morrell. If you've played at all over the last 2 years, he can look great. He can project well, but then he goes out there and misses those first 2 shots, and he somehow goes 15 straight minutes without a single fantasy point. I don't know how he does it. I've watched it with my own eyes several times. I'm very gun shy about rostering him, but when he's on, there are fewer out there who are better. He can put up a big number in a hurry. This is a great matchup for him going up against the South Alabama team. He did have a relatively pedestrian scoring game against Grambling, but he had 7 steals. He did have 11 against LIU, but his peripherals have been so far pretty solid for the first 2 games. Now, you're obviously not going to rely on the fact that he has 9 steals through those first 2 games. We need to see that scoring, but he did take 11 shots against Grambling, 8 against LIU. Those shots are there, but the LIU game was a blowout. So we'll see how that happens, but he's very much in play. But I don't blame you one bit if you can't stomach it. Brakefield at 7'4". Kind of tough there. He had some big games last year, but I don't know if we can actually play him. The matchup is ripe for him to do well. I would prefer him to be starting, even though he's playing more minutes than Dia. Murray at 7'9" is just going to be too high price for me with the other guards on this team. Murray has been, to this point, pretty efficient. He does have a big reduction in shots and usage so far, but he's playing about 33, 34 minutes as a starter. Kind of relying on the 3-point shot way more than you want to see. His numbers have gone down across the board, at least early on, and that's obviously the fact that Sean Padula is hanging around there, the Virginia Tech stud from last year. He's also seen his numbers dip. Obviously, they're trying to figure out how to play this team together. This is a lot of ball dominant, me first type players. When I say me first, I don't mean like that they're super selfish. They're just used to having the ball in their hands 24/7, right? So it's been a little bit of an adjustment for them. And Dre Davis, who comes in from Seton Hall, he was very good for them. Less of a focal point as well. He did make a couple of threes, had 4 rebounds and assists against Grambling. Looked good in that when they got pushed. playing about 24, 25 minutes a game as a starter. But all of these guys are still priced like they're at their last destination. Padula at 8.8, like that's that Virginia Tech price. They could have used him tonight, huh? Davis at 8.2, that's a Seton Hall price. Like, I don't know that we can get there on any of them. And I'm not all that crazy about paying the $7K for Morel either. Even though this is a matchup that they should put up points, I think we're going to see a situation where we've been seeing it with Gonzaga, although they had some nice scores yesterday. But so far, the first couple of slates with Gonzaga, they're cannibalizing each other. They're balanced. We're seeing it with a lot of teams because they're so loaded. And I think that's going to be the case more often than not with Ole Miss. So I'd rather go with the Barry Dunning play, get ourselves some value. If you're feeling antsy and you want to play Corey at 7-1, he's a perfect mid-major posh type of play that can do some damage against this Ole Miss team. Turnovers are going to be a factor. I think Ole Miss is going to get a lot of steals, but Corey, high assist rate, may be able to overcome that. All right, moving on, we are going to go to Baylor, which has been on the slate a ton, 2 times already through the first week. 82-69 favorite over Sam Houston State. That's a home game against Sam Houston State. KenPom has at 13 points. That should be like 25. I guess that's what happens when you get your doors blown off in a road game against Gonzaga. And then on a neutral court, you have your moments. They actually looked pretty good for the majority of the game, but they tried to give it away, but they did beat Arkansas 72-67. Offensive efficiency ranking of 12th so far, so that they've done well. One thing that I'm surprised about, VJ Edgecombe hasn't looked like the best freshman in the country. Now, you might be saying, well, isn't that supposed to be Cooper Flagg? And yeah, most people will have you believe that. I honestly thought VJ Edgecombe coming into the season was the best NBA prospect. It looks like it's going to take some time for him to get used to this level. And also another guy that's used to just having the ball in his hands 24/7, and that's not the case. Now, he did play 35 minutes against Arkansas. That was great to see. 8 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, a block, 11 points. Like, that was a great game for him. I think he's going to have many more games like that as opposed to the game against Gonzaga, where he was clearly shell-shocked. 4 points, did have 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, a steal, and an assist. Didn't shoot particularly well, 2 for 11. He dunked on Joe Few's kid. Man, that was, I don't know why he was in the game at that point, but that was mean. That was mean, VJ. But I do like him better on FanDuel. I've been using him on FanDuel the last couple Baylor slates where he's like 5K. Really gotten fond of him there. Haven't been using him on DK. Not sure I will at 7.6. It's certainly a good matchup there. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. I honestly do. I think I might be more apt to play like Corey from South Alabama over VJ just yet. And there's going to be a time when Langston Love is finally healthy. It hasn't happened in his career yet, but there's going to be a time. Still dealing with the ankle injury, and that's going to kind of cut into, some minutes for everybody else. The other freshman on the team is still relatively cheap at 4.7K. Rob Wright, used a lot of him on FanDuel over the weekend against Arkansas. Pretty decent performance there early, but they didn't end up playing him all that much. 17 minutes. He did have 10 points. I got to the foul line a lot, 2 assists. He's very aggressive when he's out there. I actually like him. He's going to be a player that's like, BJ's obviously going to go. But Rob's going to be there for probably 3, maybe 4 years. And he's going to be like one of those dudes that's just, by the time he's a senior, he's going to be such a total stud. Played 30 minutes against Gonzaga off the bench, took 12 threes in that one. Like, no fear. He was not afraid to shoot the rock, and he did a ton of that. 12, not threes, not threes, 12 twos. But he was not fearful. He got himself to the line. He did a lot of damage in that Gonzaga game, and I like what we're seeing out of him. I don't love the fact that he only played 17 minutes in that last game, though, and he's a little bit higher at 4.7 to where he can do some damage. That's one where we're getting into a dangerous range. The good thing is he's playing a Sam Houston State team that they should be able to manhandle. It's a little peculiar to see that KenPom projection. Sam Houston State has been a fairly fast team. They did give Nevada a game for a while, and then they beat the hell out of Tarleton State. So it's not as if they're, a pushover team by any means, but we're talking about a Baylor team that many thought was a Final Four contender before the season started, and still do. Norchad Omier doing his thing, drawing 5 fouls for 40, 31.4% defensive rebounding rate, 25% usage rate. Norchad Omier is a dude. Absolutely love him. Fouls have been the issue. He had the 2 early ones against Gonzaga, played through it, 15 and 9. Arkansas fouls dogged him the whole way, 15-12, even though he played 29 minutes. Like when we get into more games where he doesn't foul and plays 35, 36 minutes, he's absolutely going to shred. Priced at 9.5. This is one that on paper, he should have a really big game, but I just don't trust him to not pick up these ticky-tack fouls, which he shouldn't at this point of his career. And also, like, how much are they really going to need to push him against this Sam Houston team? If Sam Houston keeps it close, by all means, maybe Norchad is the guy. And I think he'll be chalky. He has been in the first two slates on both sides. Name recognition, lack of other options, whatever it may be, Norchad has been super chalky. And we've gotten away with mostly fading him to a degree. He's very high priced at 9.5. I am looking at some of the other options on the slate over him, though. Jeremy Roach at 6.8 and Jaden Nunn at 5.7. Nunn is certainly playable, kind of a semi-balanced type of build, if you will. Roach is a bit high for my taste. I think it's going to take him some time. I don't think he's ever going to be like this, big time 30, 35 fantasy point per guy game at Baylor, like we saw sometimes at Duke. Did have 13-2 against Arkansas, finding his way. There's just this Baylor team. They're healthy to start, and they're a little bit deeper. Another one kind of like Kansas and Bill Self. They're just deeper this year. And Rob Wright has been very aggressive. Looking at it, Wright's got the highest usage rate on the team so far at 26.1% and the highest shot rate at 25.5%. But he also has the highest assist rate at 39.3%. I do love Rob Wright, if you haven't noticed. You do have a bit of value. Josh Ojiawuna at 4K. I do think that one is actually a little bit of a sneak value. While it's built-in leverage from what we project to be probably chalkier Norchad Omier. We get 21 to 22 minutes out of Ojiawuna. He's definitely putting up 16 to 18 fantasy points, beating value. And I think we can get even more out of him as well. Looking at the early returns here for the 6'10 guy, 17% usage rate against Gonzaga, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals. Follow that up with just 4 points against Arkansas and a steal, 3 rebounds, less involved there. But he was more of a disruptor. He was in the, he really did a good job neutralizing Big Z, right? Big Z didn't have a very good game there. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Baylor's front court just, they manned up, for lack of a better term. But I do like Ojiawuna. He's a perfect type of player here against what I perceive to be a little bit of a lesser tier team that he should be able to have some damage against if he doesn't get into foul trouble. So do like the cheaper options on Baylor with Rob Wright and Ojiawuna. You do have Celestine, but the Cal transfer at 3.9, a lot of empty minutes. But if this game gets out of hand, perhaps he sees a little bit of a spike as well. On the Sam Houston State side, you've got some relatively spendier options and some guys that can be used. In the past, we haven't really wanted to target against Baylor quite as much, but you definitely can. Whoa, we're getting all the big guys up in here. What is up? Mike Kutry, not worthy, my man. I was just telling people we're still friends. I say it. You don't say it as much, but I do. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we're gonna have you on, man. What is it? It's Monday night. This is your time. So you just let me know when you can do it and you'll be on. I appreciate the support there. One of those classic I know him type moments. Appreciate you, man. All right. So the Sam Houston State starting 5, what they rolled with last game: Dorian Finister, Marcus Boykin, Lamar Wilkerson, Khalifa Sacco. It's a tough one. And Cameron Hefner. Dorian Finister was on Kansas State the last 2. I like to highlight these transfers that go from a power conference team to a lower one and pop up on our radars because they are going there to have a bigger opportunity. And so far, that's been the case for Finister. Against Nevada, 32 minutes, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, had a block and a steal. 31 minutes against Tarleton State, 15 points, 11 rebounds, a block, 2 steals. Fouls against Nevada were there, but a lot of those came late. He's played 31 and 32 minutes as a starter. 20.3% shot rate, not the highest usage rate just yet, but a 35% combined rebounding rate, 3.5% block rate, and he's just shooting 57% from long range for good measure. This dude's only 6'5", and he's out there grabbing rebounds against the likes of Nevada, which has 2 dudes over 6'10", and a Tarleton State team that plays fast and exists. And has Boo Boo Benjamin. I mean, that's a team with our guy Boo Boo Benjamin. How could you not like them? But he's looked really good. Very big fan of his. He's priced at 5.6, which is moderate value. That's one of those ranges we found. Like yesterday, DG Bailey kind of was popping for us, and he got like 4% ownership, and it's because that range is being kind of boxed out, because you either are paying down for all this perceived value that's available, and then you're obviously going up there. There's not a lot of true balanced builds happening. And if you do try to go semi-balanced, you're loading up those 6K to 7K guys. You're still finding that mid 5K range just be ignored, unless it's John Blackwell. We've seen Blackwell be kind of chalky, but otherwise that range hasn't been that popular. Finister also has the kind of porous looking box score. So a quick look there, somebody might overlook that if they're not digging in deeper. But I do like Finister there with all his minutes and expected here against this Baylor team. Let's go into the competitive game. That'll give us a true minutes here. Lamar Wilkerson and Marcus Boykin, the other two likely to play over 30 minutes. Wilkerson is priced up there at 6.7, Boykin down at 5.1. Wilkerson has been around the program for the last 3 years, played 36 minutes against Nevada, just a 21 against Tarleton State. He had some major fouls, but he does have a high shot rate, one of the highest on the team at 29.5%, making 50% of his threes. The Sam Houston State team, the plan is going to be very clear to chuck threes and try to punch Baylor in the mouth and catch them, slipping a little bit. Marcus Boykin scored 17 against Nevada in his game, 25 minutes, shot 5 of 10, 4 assists, 1 steal, 1 rebound. Against Tarleton State, he had 6 assists, very high assist rate there for him, running the offense. Don't mind any of those options. I think Hefner and Sacco are more ignores. Those two seem primed for foul trouble, especially Sacco, who's about a 7-footer. Has not grown into his body, even though he's been in college for 5 years. And the bench pieces, aside from maybe Josiah Hammonds, who did play 32 quality minutes against Nevada, but only 14 against Tarleton, it's going to be hard to trust him. You don't really need to. Teams like this that have the cheaper starting lineups, you can, kind of stay away from those bench pieces. I know I just talked about Rob Wright for a degree, but that's a different scenario, different situation, because their starting 5 is so expensive, right? But Finister at 5.6, Boykin at 5.1, Wilkerson at 6.7. That's probably going to be too high for me. I would go back to the play for South Alabama, which is Miles Corey, before I did that with him. All right, moving on to the next game here. The last game, only I could turn into Braden Smith. Which one? I know which one, but not the Colgate Gonzaga one, I'm guessing. Yeah, man, I'm growing it out. Only I could turn a 7-game slate into an hour-long procedure, by the way. But you guys are watching it, and I appreciate it. All 200 of you. All right, last game on the slate, Kentucky versus Duke. I tried to get that. There's gotta forget what it's called now, but there's like a site out there that lets you live watch games with the audience, and you can have people on there just like hanging out. I tried to get that, but it turned out to be more of a pain in the ass than I wanted. But that is the dream, where I can just have Mike, Razzle, a couple other you guys calling in, and we just hang out. That's kind of what we did on Blog Talk for a long time. All right, Kentucky versus Duke. Ken Palm has it 83-76 in favor of Duke. Kentucky playing fast under Mark Pope, no surprise there. 25th in tempo. They put 100 up on Bucknell, 103 on Wright State. Now we get to see a neutral court game between them and Duke. This Kentucky team, as I feared, new coach, but same result. They're super deep, which makes it very hard for DFS purposes, and they're going to go 9 or 10 deep. That is for sure. The starting 5 thus far has been Jackson Robinson, Amari Williams, who's been chef's kiss, Andrew Carr, Lamont Butler, and Otega Awi. Off the bench, we've been seeing Kobe Brea, Kerr Kriisa, Brandon Garrison, Colin Chandler, and Ansley Almanor. A little bit of Travis Perry, a little bit of Trent Noah, not really enough to care. It'll be interesting to see how these minutes shift in a closer game. We've seen everyone play between 18 to 25, like this is coached by Bruce Pearl. We should see all of these minutes shift up, like Jackson Robinson will be more important in this game. He has been a guy that we have been relying on in the past when he was at BYU. He's priced at a very reasonable 6.3K. Amari Williams is up there at 8.5. 5. I think, he's been bullying the opposing front court around. Big time rebounder. This is going to be a real nice test for him. He hasn't faced anybody that would get him into any foul issues. And then throughout the course of his career, he's been pretty good about that. But that Duke whistle does something to people. And I'm a little bit concerned about paying that price for him against Duke, even if it is on the neutral court. So the 8.5 price might just be more of a GPP look. We haven't seen enough from Andrew Carr at 6'7" to be playing him just yet, but this is a more competitive game, and that's a cheap price for him. If this were last year, Wake Forest, we know how good he can be. I do think Kobe Brea is going to be an interesting look at 5'6". He's going to be chucking off the bench. If Owie or Butler are offensively ineffective, we could see Brea pretty quick, but they're going to need Butler, especially for his defensive side. Kriisa had a ton of assists. He's priced at 4.6. I wonder if people are going to chase that a little bit. I will gladly pass on anything to do with Kerr Kriisa, especially if he's popular. I don't think he will be, but stranger things have happened. It's a small slate. 53.6% assist rate through 2 games. He had 12 assists. Lamar Washington so far of Washington, but that was a pretty good assist game for him. Played the 21 minutes against Bucknell, 14 against Wright State. They're just super crowded. Brandon Garrison can barely get minutes and usage. I think if we're going to use anybody on this team with any kind of consistency, it's probably going to be Jackson Robinson, maybe a little Owie. I think Brea is decent. But Williams is a man. I'm really looking forward to seeing this matchup between Williams and the Duke front court. We'll see how that shakes out. On the Duke side, I don't know. I could be out of line here. Not many people that watch the show like Duke. There are a few. One of our amazing editors is a big Duke fan, and one of our media guys, they warned me not to talk bad about Duke. But you know what? Nobody tells me what to do on SuperShow. This is the most likable Duke team in the history of Duke. Am I right? Like the Grant Hill, everybody, I think it's pretty much agreed that we all love Grant Hill. Most of you were probably not old enough to actually watch that. You might have been alive, but you probably weren't watching it like you are now. Christian Laettner, so unlikable, which just takes all the likable ability for Grant Hill away. So that team can't beat. The Mike Dunleavy team, God, no. Carlos Boozer, no. All unlikable teams. JJ Redick, one of the most hated basketball players next to Marshall Henderson. But this Duke team, man, I don't know. I am like super like weird about it, but I think this Duke team might be likable, and it's a confusing feeling. Love Con Knippel. The first game, man, he was awesome. Watching the Duke, some of the Duke exhibitions, scrimmages, all that stuff, like you could just tell that dude's different, and that's going to be the new. Like he's got a million brothers. They're all going to go to Duke. Like get used to the Knippel family. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. Con is going to be around. Like we know Flag's going to go pro. Malowak will probably be a one and done, but Con's got a good chance to come back, right? 22 points against Maine. He was just red hot from 3. Followed that up with 15 against Maine, shooting 4 of 6 from downtown. Peripherals are going to be spotty with him. He did have 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal against Maine. Had another 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal against Army. As his price continues to creep up, we have to be cognizant of that. If he does suffer from a poor shooting night, we're going to be real bad off. He's priced at 6.7 there, which we're starting to get to a territory where we need to be careful. I still think on the surface, he's underpriced for the talent. But again, he's so reliant on shooting. That's going to be tough. I would rather play, and I'm worried about this too, but come on, Malowak, who had a real nice game against Army. He's going to be until he gets priced up, and nobody really playing him yet, he's going to be one of the best like mid-range type of plays, I think, on many slates until he gets higher priced. 22 minutes against Army, 11 points, had 14 rebounds, the first collegiate double-double 2 games in. Only 6 and 6 with 3 blocks against Maine, but that was in 18 minutes. Now he's going to get a chance in a closer game. Gotta wonder, is there fouls that are going to happen there? What's going to happen with Cooper Flagg? They're going to want to lean on him a little bit, but Malowak's just going to have that opportunity for weak side blocks, a lot of rebounding. Just got to keep him on the floor. And if we get him closer to 25, 26, 27 minutes in a game like this, he's absolutely going to blow the doors off of that salary. He grabs rebounds at an alarming rate. We just haven't got a chance to really see it. You saw it a little bit against Army, but by the time it's all said and done, I think you're going to see a guy with like a 45-50% combined rebounding rate with a lot of volume on his belt and scoring, 10 to 12 points per game, whatever, but his peripherals are going to be stacked. If you could put his peripherals into Knippel's scoring, you'd have a absolute just machine of a player that we probably haven't seen since D'Angelo Russell was at Ohio State, where you just couldn't fade a guy. But love him. Priced at 6'3". I think he's cheap. I can pass on Tyrese Proctor at 6'6". We had the whole he's going to break out thing all last year. He's been fine. Malik Brown transferred in from Syracuse, still priced as a guy who's going to get lots of minutes. And if somebody gets into foul trouble ahead of him, we could see that 6'2". Wouldn't surprise me to see him actually pay that off in a game like this. Zion James, the Tulane transfer at 5'5". They're going to need his defense in this game. And then you have Caleb Foster down there at 5'3". He is a familiar name and one that I think, even though the upside isn't really there necessarily, he's a known quantity, a known name. He's going to play 25 plus minutes, possibly even 30 as a starter, and he'll have an opportunity to, give a 3x score. I just don't know how much higher than that he will give. I think these Kentucky guys are going to be real physical. We'll see how it shakes out, but Foster is one of those guys who I'm fine with, but if he ends up creeping towards like 40% ownership, I don't really want too much of him. And then you have a value in Mason Gillis at 4.3 to a degree. Cooper Flagg at 10.5. Do we want to pay for him? He, the Knippel play paid the bills on the first Duke slate. He was good too. Flagg 18, 7, and 5 with 3 steals. So high priced, he needed more. He showed that 13 points against Army, but under 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals. That was in 25 minutes. Now he's going to be playing mid-30s minutes, barring any potential foul trouble. It is going to be difficult. He's not quite to the Zion Williamson level where you really had to cringe if you faded. But I do think Flagg is going to put up a insanely high number, not a Kalkbrenner number or anything like that, but we're talking about 40 plus here. I think if Duke, the nice thing for him is that Duke has quality guards, even with Roach gone. They've got guys who won't melt in a moment like this. And they're going to want to get him going. And the nice thing is Knippel, if he's hitting threes, it's going to make the game so much easier for Flagg, and his peripherals are always going to be there. But this is going to be a game, more opportunity for Cooper Flagg to score and be closer to a 20-point scorer for a game. And if he does that, it's going to be really difficult not to have his 50-plus fantasy point game on your roster when you're dealing with a slate that is only sized at 7 games. All right, so that is it, all 7. Core-wise, this is a tough one. This is a very tough one because we've been having these slates where it's like the value is pretty appealing and the pay-ups, and probably should play Cooper Flagg because every single day that Duke hasn't been on the slate, I have said, or somebody else has said to me, I wish Cooper Flagg was on the slate. I wish Cooper Flagg was one of the pay-ups. I've got all this salary available. I wish I could pay for a Cooper Flagg. Now that we got Cooper Flagg, we're talking like we don't want to roster him. No, we got to roster him. Not going to core him, but I think we got to roster him. I got to go back to Trey Johnson. I know he's expensive at 9.6, but Jesus, he's too good. He is way, way too good. Barry Dunning at 4.4 is going to be core play number 2. I think I'm on the Dunning island there, but don't sleep on him. He's going to be putting up some numbers there, at least 20. And then core play number 3, give you another cheapie, and then you can really just do what you want. Caleb Glenn at 3.7. Glenn and Barry Dunning. That opens up the rest of your lineup a tremendous amount. You also have the Finister play there at 5.6. That's not going to break the bank whatsoever. Trying to get Trey Johnson, Cooper Flagg, those type of plays together. When I look at the guys around them, Darius Johnson, Sean Padula, Norchad O'Meara, who's good. I don't feel as inclined to pay those prices, so you can get there. And then when you go through the 8K range guys, outside of maybe Ken Evans, Aikens, Trey Davis, those types, I could take them or leave it. So I can get to Trey Johnson and Cooper Flagg there just fine with the value that is available to us. The prize picks and underdog stuff has not been updating very well until like the day of, the morning of, afternoon of. Usually I'll give you guys a couple that I really like. Props, we had We had quite a bit today that we liked. Let me just take a quick peek at the board, and then we'll get out of her. All right. Ew. The Philly matchup's taking place. St. Joe's versus Villanova. Okay. Xavier Brown is having an absolute just massive start to the season here so far. St. Joe's is a very good team. Ken Palm them beating Villanova 76-72. It might be worse than that. Although St. Joe's did lose to Central Connecticut State. That's pretty rough. But they have a nice roster. Derek Simpson is there now, one of Mike's guys. Xavier Brown, Rasheer Fleming. Xavier had 16-5-5 in the loss there. The reason I'm telling you this, he has a PRA number, which Mike did tell us not to touch PRAs, but this is a nice one. Also had 25-5-3 against Navy. Underdog is giving us a points, rebounds, and assist number at 22.5. I got to take the over on that. That just feels way too good there for Xavier Brown in a matchup against Nova, in which he'll get a chance to really accelerate and do even better. Let's see here. Nick Pringle under 7.5 real points. Pringle's he'll do fine, but I don't think he's going to score. He's not going to score here. And then let me get my Knipple number here. All they're offering is a points and assists at 16.5. We'll wait. We've been doing the 13.5 and the 14.5 point prop for him. They're probably not going to give it to us, but we'll see. If it does, that'll be what we hit. And then let's go over to Prize Picks real quick. It's fun, huh? Nothing like hanging out on a Monday night, a holiday. Kids are going back to school. You're probably going back to work. And we're hanging out late night together. 1:30 on the East Coast. See my friends in the chat. I love it. Okay, Prize Picks not pulling up, so we're not going to do that. Got to go check out the Pacific and Hawaii game taking place right now. Got Lamar Washington assists. Dude's had like 15, 8, and 10 over the last 3 games. So we're going to go check that out. Appreciate everyone who continues to support the show and the brand. We will be back Thursday night for the college football edition. Myself and Jake Kuchek. We have a couple of weeks left there. Then Saturday morning, the live Q&A, pulling double duty. College football and college basketball, the main slates. Appreciate it. You guys, as always, on your way out the door, make sure you hit the like button on the YouTube. And if you're watching on Twitter/X, make sure you like and repost for me. All of that stuff and interactions goes a long way. Let's get those green screens, window trips. Appreciate everybody who's hanging out with me. All right.